The human girl arrives. The morning sky over Zareth Military Academy burned with the colors of two suns. The golden light spread across sharp alien towers, and students from dozens of different worlds gathered in the wide landing courtyard. The academy was not just a school. It was the heart of military training for the most powerful empire in the sector. Only the elite were allowed here, and every new student carried both pride and fear. A silver transport pod descended slowly through the glowing shield dome, its engines humming like a beast holding its breath. Hundreds of alien students turned their heads to watch the new arrival. From the pod's door stepped a slim figure dressed in the academy's simple blue uniform. Her boots hit the ground softly. She was not an alien, she was human. Her name was Lena Carter, the only human accepted into the academy this year. The moment the crowd saw her, a wave of whispers spread through the courtyard. "Is that a human?" One student hissed through his gills. "She looks so weak." Another snickered, their forearms folded proudly. Most of these young aliens had only seen humans on old broadcasts, described as emotional, fragile, and too soft for real battle. Lena walked straight, her back firm, her gaze steady. She didn't look left or right. She didn't respond to their murmurs. Her face was calm, but inside her chest her heart was beating fast. She knew every single eye here was judging her, waiting for her to make one wrong step so they could laugh. But she had prepared for this moment for years. She had trained in silence, studied alien culture, and promised herself she would never let fear show. At the edge of the courtyard, a group of instructors watched the new students, their armor black with glowing red lines that marked their rank. Among them stood General Instructor Varric, a towering alien with thick muscles, 4 arms, and deep crimson eyes that burned like fire. His voice could silence an entire hall, and his reputation was legendary. He had fought in wars before these students were even born, and he had no patience for weakness. When his eyes fell on Lena, his expression shifted into a cold smirk. "Well," he muttered in his native tongue, loud enough for the other instructors to hear, "they sent us a human this year. This should be entertaining." The others chuckled quietly, knowing exactly what that smirk meant. The courtyard assembly began with the usual announcements, rules, and speeches. But everyone's attention kept drifting toward the lone human standing in the second row. Lena stood like a statue, listening carefully to every word, not blinking even when the alien next to her tried to push her slightly with his elbow to test her reaction. She didn't move an inch. When the speech ended, General Varric walked forward, his steps heavy like a drumbeat. The crowd parted as he approached the new students. His presence was like a storm entering a quiet room. He stopped right in front of Lena, towering over her like a wall of muscle and armor. The courtyard fell completely silent. "Step forward, human," his voice echoed. Translated through the Academy's built-in translator, Lena took one measured step forward, her boots clicking against the metal ground. Her eyes looked up to meet his without fear. Varric slowly circled her, studying her like a predator studying its prey. "So this is what humanity sends to our academy," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "A thin creature with soft skin and no claws." A ripple of laughter moved through the students, some covering their mouths, others openly pointing. Lena stood still, letting the wave of mockery pass over her like wind over stone. Varric stopped in front of her again and pointed to a training spear placed on a nearby rack. "Pick it up," he ordered. She moved without hesitation. Gripping the spear tightly, it was heavier than she expected. The alien metal was dense, but she didn't let the weight show on her face. Varric raised his arms, demonstrating a traditional Zareth warrior salute, a complicated series of spins, stances, and final poses that took alien students months to master. Then he turned to her, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Your turn, human," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd began to whisper again. "She'll drop it," someone muttered. "She can't do it," another said. Lena didn't answer. She replayed every movement she had just seen in her mind like a recording, her brain breaking it down piece by piece. Angle by angle, her muscles tensed and aligned. She took a deep breath and began. The spear twirled in her hands, at first slowly, then faster. Her feet moved with a surprising grace. She followed the exact rhythm Varric had shown. Her movements were smooth and precise. By the time she reached the final stance, the courtyard had fallen completely quiet. Not a single whisper remained. The spear slammed into the ground with a sharp sound as she completed the salute flawlessly. Varric's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, his crimson eyes narrowing. The alien students stared at her in disbelief. Their earlier laughter frozen on their faces, Lena didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply stepped back into line, her heart still pounding, but her face calm as stone. In that silent moment, she had made her first impression. The general's challenge had backfired, and the classroom full of aliens who expected a joke found themselves speechless. Above them, the academy bells rang, signaling the start of training, but whispers began to spread like wildfire across the corridors. The human girl did not fail. She copied the general's salute. She didn't even flinch, and in the shadow of the courtyard, General Varric watched her walk away with a new kind of interest. Not amusement this time, but the interest of a warrior who had just spotted something unexpected. The public challenge. The corridors of Zareth Military Academy were wide and made of dark alien metal that seemed to absorb sound. Lights ran along the ceiling like glowing veins, and groups of cadets moved toward their assigned classrooms for the first combat theory session. Lena walked silently among them, her presence drawing curious and hostile looks alike. Though no one spoke to her directly, whispers followed her every step like shadows that clung to her back. When she reached Training Hall 3, she paused at the tall doorway where the alien emblem was carved into the wall. It looked like a mix between a spearhead and a flame, the symbol of strength and discipline. Inside the hall, rows of alien cadets stood at attention, their uniforms perfectly pressed, their bodies strong and well-trained. The atmosphere was strict and disciplined. At the far end of the hall stood General Instructor Varric, his forearms folded behind his back, his crimson eyes locked on the group like a predator watching a herd. He remembered her from the courtyard earlier, the human girl who had flawlessly copied his salute, and somewhere deep inside his pride still burned. He had intended to humiliate her in front of everyone, but instead she had turned the moment into silence. Now he wanted to reclaim his authority, to crush the growing whispers among the cadets before they grew into respect. As Lena stepped inside, every head turned toward her. Conversations died, and a cold hush filled the air. She walked to her assigned position in the last row and stood straight, not reacting to the stares around her. Varric's gaze followed her, slow and heavy, like the weight of a storm hanging above. Then, with a sudden movement, he raised one of his arms and called out in a booming voice, "Human, step forward." His words echoed across the metal walls. Lena stepped out of the line and walked toward him with controlled steps, her boots clicking steadily against the floor. All eyes in the room locked onto her like a spotlight had turned. Varric gestured toward the front platform where demonstration weapons were arranged neatly, and among them was the combat spear, heavier and longer than the one she had held earlier. "This academy," Varric began, his voice sharp and commanding, "is built on discipline, strength, and honor. Those who enter must prove themselves before their peers." He turned slightly to look at the cadets and then back to Lena. "Some of you come from noble warrior clans, others from colonies with proud traditions, but this human stands among you without such heritage, without training in our ways. Let us see if she deserves to be here." A low murmur rose from the cadets, some nodding eagerly, others smirking. Lena remained calm, her hands behind her back, her eyes fixed on him. Varric moved to the side and pointed at the central dueling circle drawn on the floor. "Pick up the spear," he commanded. Lena picked it up. The weight pulled at her arms, but she steadied it with firm hands. Years of quiet training had prepared her for this, though no one else knew that. Varric then turned to the class and raised his voice. "Today we will hold a demonstration," he announced. "The human will face me in a duel, and through this test, we will see if she truly belongs here, or if she will crumble like dry leaves under pressure." The room erupted in excited whispers. Cadets leaned forward with anticipation, some even laughed softly. imagining the scene of their feared instructor easily defeating the strange human girl. But beneath the surface of their amusement was something else, too. Curiosity. What if she managed to surprise them again? Varric entered the dueling circle with deliberate steps, his forearms shifting as he picked up a ceremonial combat blade, its edge sharp and glowing faintly with blue energy. He twirled it easily as if it weighed nothing, then took his stance. He was not planning to injure her severely, but he wanted to make this moment unforgettable for every cadet watching. He wanted her to break, to hesitate, to make a mistake he could magnify. Lena stepped into the circle opposite him, her spear held upright. Her stance firm, though slightly different from the alien style. It had small human adjustments that came from her own training methods. Varric noticed the difference and sneered. "This is your chance, human," he said. "You can refuse and walk out, and I will mark you as a coward. Your record will carry that mark forever. No one will blame you for knowing your place." His words hung in the air like venom, but Lena's reply was steady and clear. "I accept," she said. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the hum of the academy's walls seemed to fade. Varric nodded slowly, his smirk deepening. Then, in a sudden burst, he lunged forward with incredible speed, the kind that most beginners couldn't even track with their eyes. His blade cut through the air toward her side. The cadets gasped collectively, expecting to see her weapon fly from her hands or her body stumble backward. But Lena moved, not with the stiffness of alien tradition, but with human fluidity. She slid to the side at the last moment. The blade missing by inches, her spear came up instinctively. Meeting his arm with a firm block, the clash echoed through the hall. She didn't attack recklessly, she observed, reading his movements like patterns in a book. Every step he took gave her more information. Every strike revealed rhythm. The cadets leaned closer, their earlier laughter fading into stunned silence. No one had expected her to even last one strike. Yet here she was, still standing, still calm, and watching him with eyes that burned with quiet determination. Varric increased the speed of his attacks, his forearms weaving a storm of steel, but Lena responded with quick sidesteps, flexible spins, and well-timed parries. She wasn't overpowering him, but she was adapting. Second by second, for the first time, a few cadets began to whisper not mockingly, but in awe. "She's still standing," one said under his breath. "She's learning," another murmured, and Varric, inside the storm he had created, felt the faint sting of frustration. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to end quickly. But the human girl was reading him like no student ever had. Her calm gaze met his, and for a heartbeat, he saw something he didn't expect. Not fear, not arrogance, but focus, pure and unshakable. The duel begins. The training hall grew unnaturally quiet as Lena and Varric stood across from each other inside the glowing dueling circle. The smooth black floor reflected the faint blue energy from the instructor's blade, and the air between them was charged with tension so sharp it could almost be felt on the skin. The alien cadets crowded around the edges, their eyes wide with anticipation. This was no ordinary training match. This was a test of strength, pride, and identity. Varric was not just an instructor, he was a decorated war veteran, a symbol of alien discipline while Lena was a lone human, a newcomer who had already shaken expectations by refusing to bend. Varric held his blade low and then brought it upward in a slow arc, the blue energy humming as he shifted into a combat stance that all Zareth warriors recognized. It was the Predator's approach, a style meant to overwhelm opponents through a combination of speed, power, and psychological pressure. His forearms adjusted their grip like an experienced spider preparing to strike, his crimson eyes fixed on her, calculating every detail of her posture, her breathing, her grip on the spear. He was ready to break her spirit in front of everyone. Lena tightened her fingers around the spear, feeling its cold weight. She could feel the stares drilling into her back from every angle, waiting for her to make a single mistake. But her breathing slowed, steady and calm. Her eyes didn't look at the weapon. They watched him, not with fear, but with sharp observation. She noticed how his lower right arm twitched before each shift, how his left foot pressed into the floor a moment before he lunged. Small details, but to her they were like puzzle pieces falling into place. The signal to begin was given by a short, piercing sound from the overhead speaker, and Varric moved first. He exploded forward with terrifying speed, his body a blur. The blue blade swung horizontally in a strike meant to force her on the defensive instantly. The cadets gasped. Most beginners wouldn't even see that attack coming, let alone block it, but Lena pivoted on her heel, the spear sliding up to meet the blow at an angle. The clash echoed through the hall. Energy crackled where metal met alien steel. She staggered slightly under the force, but she didn't fall. Her stance absorbed the impact like flowing water. Varric followed with a spinning overhead strike using his upper arms while the lower arms swept low in a feint. It was a classic Zareth maneuver meant to catch overconfident opponents. Lena's eyes narrowed. She stepped back just in time, the blade missing her torso by inches. The movement looked instinctive. But it was more than instinct. It was adaptive observation. She was learning his rhythm in real time. The cadets leaned forward, their initial smirks gone, replaced by focused attention. No one had ever lasted this long against Varric during a public demonstration. Usually, his opponents were disarmed or knocked down within seconds. But Lena held her ground like a quiet storm. Her feet moved lightly. Her spear swirled defensively and offensively in quick bursts. She wasn't trying to overpower him. She was trying to read him. Every attack gave her new information. Every dodge and parry sharpened her timing. Varric's expression began to shift. His confident grin fading into a serious scowl, he increased his speed. His forearms becoming a blur of motion as he unleashed a barrage of strikes designed to overwhelm her from every angle. The sound of their weapons colliding echoed like thunder through the room. Lena's arms shook from the repeated impacts, but her eyes never left his. She moved in tight, efficient motions, conserving energy, slipping between his attacks rather than meeting them head-on. For a brief moment, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Lena stepped sideways during one of his heavy downward strikes, letting his blade smash into the floor. Sparks flew as the energy blade scraped against the black metal. She spun the spear behind her back and jabbed forward toward his lower left arm, not to injure, but to interrupt his rhythm. The move worked. Varric pulled back in surprise. His pattern broken, whispers erupted through the crowd. "She countered him," one cadet muttered in disbelief. "She's actually fighting him," another whispered. A third simply shook his head. This is not possible. Varric's pride burned. His opponent was not just surviving. She was forcing him to adjust, something he had not needed to do against a student in years. His crimson eyes narrowed to sharp slits as he reset his stance, the playful, testing attitude gone. Now he moved like a real warrior, his movements precise, dangerous, and relentless. The air itself seemed to vibrate under the force of his next charge. Lena felt the weight of his true strength pressing against her. But instead of panicking, a strange focus settled over her mind. Everything else faded away. The crowd, the noise, the whispers. All that remained was the rhythm of the fight. His breathing, the shift of his weight, the flicker of his eyes before each move. She wasn't reacting anymore, she was anticipating. He lunged, but she was already moving. She stepped to the side, her spear intercepting the blade at a perfect angle. Twisting it downward, the motion wasn't flashy, but it was effective. It threw him slightly off balance, and for the first time, the cadets saw the legendary general instructor take a step back during a demonstration. Gasps rippled through the room like a wave. The clash wasn't over, but something had changed. This was no longer a one-sided display. It had become a real duel, one between a proud alien warrior and a human girl who refused to be broken. And deep inside, Varric felt something unexpected stirring. Respect. Though he would never admit it aloud. Not yet. Humiliation backfires. The sound of clashing weapons filled the training hall like a storm trapped inside metal walls. Every strike from Varric carried the weight of his pride and years of experience. And every counter from Lena carried the quiet determination of someone who had prepared for this moment her entire life. Sweat began to gather along her hairline. Her arms ached from blocking repeated heavy blows, but her focus did not waver. Her eyes were locked on him, sharp and analytical, studying every movement like a scientist dissecting a complex pattern. Varek's strikes became faster, sharper, more aggressive. His forearms created a blur of energy and steel that would have crushed any normal opponent. He wanted to push her into panic, to make her stumble, to give the watching cadets the humiliating moment they were expecting. His pride demanded that this fight end in dominance, not doubt. His reputation was on the line. After all, if a human girl could stand against him, what would the others think? But Lena was not like his usual opponents. She wasn't trying to overpower him through strength. She was surviving through precision, reading his patterns, waiting patiently for the one moment when his attack rhythm would slip. She understood something he didn't expect. Even the strongest warriors had habits, and habits could be used against them. As the duel reached its peak, Varek raised his blade high for a crushing downward strike, a move that usually ended fights instantly. The cadets leaned forward, expecting to see her weapon fly out of her hands or her body collapse under the force. His top arms brought the blade down like a hammer while his lower arms feinted to her side to block any escape. It was a textbook finishing maneuver, one that had defeated hundreds of students before. But Lena moved differently. She didn't try to meet his power head-on. At the last possible second, she twisted her body sideways, letting the massive blade crash into the floor with a thunderous crack. The impact sent a shock wave through the dueling circle. The floor lights flickered for a moment. Before Varek could recover from the momentum of his failed strike, Lena pivoted on her heel, sliding behind him with smooth speed. Her spear swept low and struck the back of his left knee with precise force. Not enough to injure permanently, but enough to break his balance. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, the great general instructor stumbled forward. His lower arms flailed to regain control, and his blade scraped against the floor. The sound echoed through the hall like a gasp turned into metal. The watching cadets froze in place, their mouths slightly open. They had never seen him stumble like this. Not once, not ever. Lena didn't attack further. She didn't laugh. She didn't even speak. She simply straightened her back, lowered her spear, and stepped backward with a calm, disciplined expression. It wasn't arrogance. It was quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need words to make its point. Her stance spoke louder than any insult. The silence that followed was deafening. All the whispers, all the laughter, all the smirks that had filled the room earlier were gone. Every cadet stared at the scene before them, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The legendary Varek, a warrior whose name carried fear through the academy halls, had stumbled in front of everyone because of a human girl. Varek's chest rose and fell heavily, not from exhaustion but from a mix of shock and wounded pride. His crimson eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing into thin slits. He straightened slowly, his blade still humming with energy. His mind burned with the realization that she had outplayed him, not through raw strength but through intelligence and perfect timing. And that humiliation cut deeper than any wound could. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a single cadet exhaled loudly, breaking the silence. It was followed by a ripple of quiet murmurs, but this time they were not mocking. They were full of disbelief and a growing sense of awe. "She made him stumble," one alien whispered in shock. "I thought this was impossible," another said softly. "She's different," came another voice, half in admiration and half in confusion. Varek turned his gaze slowly toward the crowd, his pride warning them not to cross a line, and instantly all voices died again. But the damage was already done. The image of him losing his balance was now burned into every mind. The story would spread through the academy before nightfall, and whispers would follow him too. Lena stood silently, lowering her spear to her side, her breathing steady. Inside, she felt her heart racing like a drum. But she didn't allow any of that to reach her face. She had not only survived his challenge, she had exposed a weakness in front of everyone, intentionally or not, and that shifted the balance between them in a way neither had expected. For the first time, the duel didn't end with Varek's victory and a student's humiliation. It ended with his pride cracked and the audience speechless. And deep inside his warrior heart, beneath the layers of arrogance and discipline, Something unfamiliar stirred, a mix of anger, curiosity, and grudging respect. This human girl was not just a student. She was becoming a problem he could not ignore, the secret behind her skills. Night descended over Zareth Military Academy like a dark veil. The twin suns had sunk below the alien mountains, leaving the vast campus bathed in the soft glow of hovering lights that floated above the pathways like silent guardians. Most of the cadets had returned to their quarters, exhausted from the day's intense drills, their conversations still buzzing with the memory of what they had witnessed in the training hall earlier. The story of the human girl making General Varric stumble had already spread through every hallway and dormitory. Whispers carried it like wildfire, changing slightly with every telling. Some said she moved like a machine. Others said she used human tricks that no alien could counter. Whatever the version, the core truth remained. Something unprecedented had happened. While most of the academy slept or bragged about the day's events, Lena did not rest. She slipped quietly through the empty corridors, her boots making barely any sound on the polished metal floors. She carried her training spear on her back, and her uniform jacket was tied around her waist. The cold air from the night vents flowed through the halls, but she welcomed it. It kept her alert. She moved with purpose toward one of the unused lower training rooms, a place where no one usually went at this hour. She entered the dimly lit room, sealing the door behind her. The silence inside was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the power lines running through the walls. She placed the spear on the ground, activated a small holographic device she carried, and within seconds, multiple holograms of alien instructors appeared around her. They were recordings she had collected secretly over the years, some from broadcasts, some from leaked training files she had studied during long sleepless nights back on Earth. Each figure demonstrated different combat techniques, stances and movements unique to the Zareth warriors. Lena stood in the center, watching carefully, her eyes tracing every line of movement, every shift of balance. She didn't rush. She paused the holograms at critical moments, rewound them, and repeated the sequences over and over again. Then she mimicked them with her own body, adjusting where her human physiology was different. She didn't have 4 arms. She didn't have the same bone structure or reflex patterns, but she found ways to compensate, to adapt, to mirror their techniques until they flowed naturally through her movements. Her spear spun through the air with a soft whistle. Her feet glided across the floor in patterns that blended alien precision with human flexibility. Sweat formed on her forehead as she repeated complex sequences again and again without hesitation. Every mistake was corrected instantly. Every movement was sharpened with relentless focus. She wasn't simply training for strength. She was training to understand the language of alien combat, to make it her own. Unknown to Lena, a pair of eyes were watching her from the shadows of the corridor outside. Kiri, a young alien cadet from a clan known for their analytical minds, had followed her out of curiosity after hearing the rumors. Unlike the others, Kiri wasn't driven by mockery. She was genuinely intrigued by how a human could stand against Varric. She pressed her back against the wall and peered through the small glass panel on the door, her large reflective eyes catching every movement. What she saw left her breathless. Kiri had trained for years to perfect her people's techniques, with instructors guiding her at every step. But this human girl was teaching herself in silence, using nothing but observation, memory, and discipline. She moved with a strange combination of grace and raw determination that was unlike anything Kiri had seen before. There was no arrogance, no need to show off, only a deep hunger to improve, to become better, to prepare. After nearly 2 hours of continuous training, Lena finally stopped, breathing heavily but not exhausted. Her endurance had been forged through years of solitude and practice. She sat down on the cold floor, wiping sweat from her face, and looked at the holograms still floating around her. There was a faint glimmer in her eyes, not pride, but something heavier, a quiet resolve. Kiri, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, slowly pushed the door open. The soft hiss of air made Lena turn sharply, her spear already half raised, but when she saw it was just a cadet, she lowered it slightly. Kiri stepped inside cautiously, her alien features reflecting the dim blue lights of the room. Her voice carried a mix of hesitation and awe. Why are you doing this?" she asked, her language translated through the embedded system. Lena looked at her for a long moment, then pointed at the holograms. "Because I have to," she said simply. Her voice calm but firm. Kiri tilted her head, confused. "You already proved yourself today. You made General Varric stumble. No one has ever done that. Why keep pushing yourself like this?" Lena leaned back against the wall, looking up at the ceiling as if searching for something far away. "I didn't come here to prove them wrong," she said softly. "I came here to prepare for something worse." The words hung in the air like a chill. Kiri didn't fully understand what Lena meant, but something in her tone sent a shiver down the alien girl's spine. There was no bravado, no drama, only the weight of someone who carried a responsibility no one else could see. As Kiri left the room later that night, her mind was spinning. She realized that Lena was not like the others. She was not here to win small battles or earn applause. She was preparing for something bigger, something no one else seemed aware of. And for the first time, Kiri felt a strange mixture of respect and unease toward the human girl. Meanwhile, Lena stood alone in the training room, staring at the silent holograms before turning them off one by one. The darkness swallowed the room again, but inside her mind, the patterns continued to play, faster and sharper. Like a storm quietly building strength behind a calm face, the turning point the next morning began like any other at Zareth Military Academy. The twin suns cast their sharp light across the metallic courtyards. Cadets moved in disciplined lines toward their scheduled drills, and instructors shouted commands with the usual cold authority. But beneath the surface of daily routine, something had changed. The story of the duel had spread beyond the training halls. Whispers reached the senior cadets, officers, and even the higher instructors. Everyone was talking about the human girl who had stood against General Varric and made him stumble. The name Lena was no longer spoken with laughter. It was spoken with cautious curiosity. Some respected her, some resented her, and others simply wanted to see if the story was exaggerated. Lena walked through the corridors with the same quiet posture as always. Her uniform perfectly neat, her steps steady. She did not acknowledge the stares that followed her. She had grown used to eyes watching her like a strange creature under examination. But today the atmosphere felt different, heavier, as if the entire academy was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Kiri walked a few steps behind her, not exactly as a friend yet, but no longer an enemy either. Her sharp eyes observing everything. In the main courtyard, General Varric stood with several instructors, his arms folded tightly, his expression unreadable. His pride had been wounded, but he had not forgotten the lesson. He was watching Lena with a colder, more focused gaze than before, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who needed to be measured carefully. His instincts as a warrior told him that this girl might affect more than just classroom discipline. Before the day's classes could begin, an unexpected alarm ripped through the academy, a deep, resonating sound that made the ground vibrate. The cadets immediately froze. Their training kicked in. This was not a scheduled drill they had been informed about. Red emergency lights began to flash across the walls, and a voice echoed through the academy speakers in the alien language, translated instantly into every cadet's earpiece. Emergency combat simulation activated. Level 4. All cadets report to their assigned response zones immediately. A wave of confusion and panic moved through the younger cadets. Level 4 simulations were rare. They were designed to mimic real battlefield chaos, introducing unpredictable threats that broke usual formations and tested leadership under pressure. Even some of the senior cadets exchanged nervous glances. General Varric barked orders sharply, splitting units into squads and directing them toward different training sectors. The usual drills had turned into something far more serious. Lena followed her assigned group toward Sector 7, a large simulation zone that could change terrain and environment at will. Massive walls shifted to create alien landscapes filled with moving targets, traps, and simulated enemies that attacked unpredictably. The moment the cadets entered the sector, the ground shifted beneath their feet, transforming into a rocky wasteland with jagged spikes, glowing cracks, and sudden gusts of wind that threw off balance. Simulated enemy drones emerged from hidden openings, firing stun blasts that hit several unprepared cadets instantly. The alien squad leader barked commands using standard protocol, ordering everyone into fixed defensive lines, but the drones moved in irregular formations, attacking from unexpected angles. Their programming designed to confuse traditional alien tactics. Panic started to ripple through the formation. Several cadets broke ranks to take cover, while others shouted conflicting orders. The line was collapsing fast. Lena scanned the chaos, her sharp eyes picking up the pattern behind the drone movements. Their attacks weren't random. They were cycling through phases, targeting blind spots and communication gaps created by rigid alien tactics. She had studied this kind of adaptive warfare during her late-night training sessions. While alien soldiers relied on strict formations, humans excelled at improvisation, and this was her element. She stepped forward through the scattered formation, her voice firm but clear. "Break the line. Split into 2 staggered groups, push left and create crossfire angles," she ordered. The alien cadets hesitated, unused to hearing a human give commands. But when another drone volley struck and nearly broke their defense completely, Kiri shouted from behind, "Do what she says!" Her voice carried unexpected authority. The cadets adjusted reluctantly at first, but the moment they shifted into the new formation, the attack pattern of the drones faltered. Their programming had been expecting standard alien responses, not human improvisation. Lena moved through the formation quickly, pointing out weak spots, repositioning stunned cadets, redirecting fire toward drone-blind zones. Her quick thinking began to stabilize the situation. General Varric appeared at the observation platform above the sector, his eyes narrowing as he watched the chaos unfold. He had expected the cadets to struggle. That was the point of the drill. But what he saw made him lean forward slightly. The human girl was not just surviving the chaos, she was leading it. The alien squad leader had fallen into confusion, and she had naturally taken control without hesitation. Her orders were efficient, clear, and based on instinct rather than rigid training. As the battle simulation intensified, Lena adapted again. Recognizing the shift in drone behavior, she ordered the cadets to rotate positions, drawing the enemy fire into a narrow funnel, then directed a counterattack that neutralized several drone clusters in rapid succession. The aliens followed her commands now without resistance, their initial doubt replaced by growing trust as they saw her strategies working in real time. By the time the emergency simulation ended, Sector 7 stood battered but intact, their survival rate among the highest across all sectors. The alien cadets looked around at each other in stunned silence, breathing heavily, still trying to understand what had just happened. Many of them turned their eyes toward Lena, not with mockery but with genuine respect. Kiri approached her slowly, her expression a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You led us," she whispered high above. General Varric watched her silently, his arms folded, his pride still bruised, but his warrior instincts recognized something he could no longer deny. This human girl had something his soldiers lacked, the ability to think outside the structure, to adapt where others froze, and whether he liked it or not. The entire academy had just witnessed it. The classroom falls silent. The following day, the academy halls were buzzing like a hive. The emergency simulation had become the central topic of every conversation. From the youngest cadets in basic training to the senior officers who rarely showed emotion, everyone had heard about what happened in Sector 7. The squad that had been expected to fall apart under pressure had achieved one of the highest performance scores ever recorded for their level. And at the center of it all was Lena, the human girl who, less than a week ago, had been whispered about as a fragile outsider. Now her name was spoken with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and even fear for the first time. Her presence was no longer a joke. It was a question none of them had an answer to. As Lena walked toward the main classroom for the morning assembly, heads turned in every corridor. Conversations paused when she passed by. Cadets who once laughed now stepped aside silently. Others stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Kiri walked beside her with a proud glimmer in her alien eyes, as if she had chosen the right side of history, though Lena kept her usual calm expression. Inside, she felt the weight of what was happening. She hadn't come to lead or impress, but circumstances had pulled her into the center of attention. The classroom itself was a massive hall with rising rows of seats, glowing walls, and a central platform where instructors delivered their lectures. General Varric stood at the front, his crimson eyes colder than usual, his arms folded behind his back like a stone statue. The air inside was heavy and tense. The cadets filled the room quickly but spoke in hushed tones. Everyone sensed that this day would not be ordinary. Something was about to shift again. When Lena entered, the room seemed to contract around her. Every eye followed her movements as she made her way to her usual seat in the back. But before she could sit, Varric's deep voice cut through the hall like a blade. "Lena Carter," he said, his words translated with perfect clarity. "Step forward." She froze for only a second, then walked down the central aisle toward the platform, her boots echoing softly against the floor. She stopped a few meters away from him, standing tall, her hands behind her back in a formal stance. Varric's gaze bore into her like fire, but this time it was different. Beneath the hard exterior there was something thoughtful, measured, as if he was looking at an opponent on the battlefield rather than a student in his class. Varric began to speak slowly, his voice filling every corner of the hall. Yesterday, during the emergency combat simulation, Sector 7 was expected to collapse within the first phase, he said. But that did not happen. Instead, the unit adapted, reorganized, and countered the enemy, achieving results beyond the projected metrics. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. And it was not because of alien command. His eyes narrowed, focusing on her. It was because of a human. Whispers erupted across the hall like a sudden wind. Cadets looked at each other with shock. Even those who had seen it with their own eyes hadn't expected Varric to acknowledge it publicly. He raised one of his forearms slightly, and the whispers died instantly. Silence swept through the room like a wave. He continued, his voice calm but carrying undeniable force. "When I first saw you, human, I saw a fragile outsider who would crumble at the first test," he said, his tone almost like a confession to the entire class. "I challenged you, expecting to break you in front of your peers. But instead, you forced me to step back, something no student has ever done." He leaned forward slightly, his crimson eyes glinting. "And yesterday, you did something even greater. You led my cadets when their leader froze. You saw patterns they could not, and you acted without hesitation." The entire classroom held its breath. No one moved, no one spoke. Every alien cadet was staring at Lena now, not with scorn, not with laughter, but with the kind of sharp focus usually reserved for those who had earned their place through undeniable strength. She stood there quietly, not smiling, not boasting, simply listening, her face calm but her heart beating steadily inside her chest. Varric turned away from her for a moment, his voice rising as he addressed the entire hall. "Let this be clear," he said. "Strength does not always come from tradition. Power does not always come from the expected place. Today, you have all witnessed something rare. A human stood in this hall and forced silence upon warriors of the Zareth." He turned back to her, his expression unreadable then, in a slow and deliberate movement that sent a shockwave through the room. Varric raised his upper right arm to his chest and performed the Zareth warrior salute, the same salute she had once copied perfectly on her first day. The classroom went utterly still. The sound of his armor plates shifting echoed softly in the silence. Every cadet's eyes widened, seeing their feared instructor offer a sign of acknowledgement and respect to a human girl. For a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. Lena stood frozen, not out of fear but from the sheer weight of the moment. She lowered her head slightly in acknowledgement, not trying to mimic his gesture this time, but offering a quiet human nod. A simple act that carried unexpected strength. The room remained silent. No one dared to speak. Even the usual hum of the walls seemed to fade, and then, in that heavy, powerful silence, something shifted permanently. The human girl who had arrived as a quiet outsider had become something else entirely. A presence the Academy could no longer ignore. The classroom had fallen silent once when she copied a salute. But this silence was different. This was the silence of respect, earned through action, resilience, and a strength none of them had seen coming, high above. The Academy banners fluttered against the wind from the ventilation system, and somewhere deep within the structure, the whispers of what happened that day began to travel through the ranks once more, not as gossip this time, but as legend in the making.